First show of 2025. Trev's Hockey Show. I'm the Trev. That's too sweet. Anyway, continuing on with retired numbers. And I'm just going to say this once. Expect to see a lot of these, or at least as many as I can put down this year. I mean, we're at 60 for the playlist. I want to get it to 100 by December 31st, but we'll see where we're at December 31st. But as I said, this is the first video of 2025, but we're also talking about the second number retired by the Vancouver Canucks. And to be perfectly honest, in the beginning stages of our subject's time with the Canucks, he was the face of the franchise. I mean, he also had the nickname of Captain Canuck. I mean, one could even say he was one of the more underrated power forwards to play the position, but in anything you wanted to call him, clutch was always a choice word. Clutch in clutch moments. And today, we're talking about the number 16, which is worn by Trevor Linden. So let's talk about it. Alright, so Trevor Linden's 16 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks began on June 11th, 1988, when he was drafted second overall in the 1988 NHL entry draft. Now, to be fair, he went behind Mike Modano, so he at least went behind somebody who deserved to go number one, not a case of, well, it's number one because he was hot at the time or anything like that. And he was legit passed up by a good player. Not to say Linden wasn't good, because he was really good. At the time Linden was drafted, though, Vancouver was more of a rebuild kind of team, looking to get back to the Stanley Cup Finals, but more importantly, to get back to being a playoff contending team, having missed the playoffs the previous 2 seasons, and not making it past the division semifinals for the 3 seasons the Canucks did make the playoffs after advancing to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1982. Now, Linden would make the roster right off the hop for the 88-89 season, making his NHL debut on October 6th, 1988, and scoring his first NHL goal on October 18th, 1988 against the New York Islanders. Not being content with that, he also scored his first of 4 hat tricks as a Vancouver Canuck in the regular season, 1 month after scoring his first against the Minnesota North Stars, and his second hat trick 5 days later against the Buffalo Sabres. So, getting the hat tricks out early. All told, for Linden's rookie campaign, he would share the team lead in goals with 30, while putting up a respectable 59 points in 80 games, which would ultimately help in the playoffs, or in the Canucks getting back to the playoffs for the first time since 1986. That playoff run, though, would ultimately end in heartbreak, as since this was a very back-and-forth series and did manage to go a full 7 games, the Canucks would find themselves on the receiving end of a Game 7 overtime goal by the eventual Stanley Cup champs in the Calgary Flames, with Linden going a point per game in those 7 games. Now, for that respectable rookie campaign of his, Linden would be named to the NHL's All-Rookie team and would finish second in Calder Memorial Trophy voting, losing it to Brian Leetch. So, again, it's not that there wasn't anybody that didn't deserve it, because Brian Leetch deserved to be Rookie of the Year that year. But things are looking promising after year 1. But ultimately, the 89-90 season will be a giant step backwards for the Canucks, as they return to being a miss-the-playoff kind of team, finishing 5th in the Smythe Division, with Linden adding 51 points in 73 games played. The 1990-91 season would see the Canucks return to a playoff contending team, with the team finishing 4th in the Smythe Division. More importantly, this would be Linden's first of 2 NHL All-Star games this season. And on top of that, the Canucks would also have a rotating captain system after previous captain Stan Smeel had retired. We talked about him here. And this rotating captain system went between Linden, Doug Lidster, and Dan Quinn, all wearing the C for the Canucks for selective games. Now, for his part, Linden would lead the team in scoring, putting up a career high in goals with 33 to go with his team leading 70 points in a full 80 games. Now, while the Canucks did make the playoffs, their time was short, being eliminated by the Los Angeles Kings in 6 games, with Linden adding 7 assists. Now, after that rotating captain experience, the 91-92 season would see Linden be named the sole captain of the Vancouver Canucks, a position he would hold until 1997, and more importantly made him the youngest captain of the Vancouver Canucks at the time. And I also see the Canucks get significantly better, with the team finishing first in the Smythe division for their first division championship since 1975. 74-75 was when they had the divisions after Smythe, Norris, Adams, and Patrick. So they were the first Smythe division champions. Now, Linden would play in his second and last All-Star game this season, while adding a team-leading 75 points in 80 games. Now, in the playoffs, it'd be a ride in the first round, coming back from a 3-1 series deficit against the Winnipeg Jets to turn around and eliminate them in 7 games before ultimately hitting a roadblock in the Edmonton Oilers and being eliminated in 6. Now, Linden would add 12 points in 13 playoff games. The 1992-93 season would see Linden transition from playing wing to playing center. Now, this was done to help fill the void left by some off-season moves, free agency, trades, all that stuff. And really, it only seemed to help the cause, with the Canucks repeating as Smythe Division champions, with Linden adding 72 points in another full 84-game schedule, including matching his career high in goals with 33. Now, in the playoffs, it was almost like a repeat of last season, eliminating the Winnipeg Jets in 6 instead of 7, including a pair of overtime wins in Game 5 and Game 6, before being eliminated in 6 to the eventual Stanley Cup finalists in the Los Angeles Kings, with Linden adding 13 points in 12 games. So the 1993-94 season would see the NHL do a geographical realignment to ease on scheduling and such. And so thus we would see the Smythe Division ultimately get renamed the Pacific Division, which weirdly and coincidentally, the Canucks were first division champs and last division champs of the old Smythe Division. So there's a little tidbit. You can use that somewhere in a bar bet. The Canucks would finish the season second in the Pacific Division, with Linden adding 61 points in another full 84 games. Now, in the playoffs, the Canucks were on an absolute mission. After falling to a 3-1 deficit against the first-seeded Calgary Flames, they would come back to take the next 3 games, all in overtime, including Linden scoring the Game 6 overtime winner, with Game 7 being a double overtime victory to eliminate the Flames in a full 7 games, before making short work of the Dallas Stars in 5, and before doing the same thing to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the Western Conference Finals to advance to the Stanley Cup Finals for the second time in franchise history, the first time since 1982. Now, for their opponent, they would end up running into the President's Trophy winners and the heavy favorites in the New York Rangers, who were still riding the high of the Mark Messier guarantee, where he guaranteed they would beat the New Jersey Devils in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and then ended up beating them in Game 7 to make it to the Stanley Cup Final. So, Vancouver had a little time off, but the Rangers are still the favorites. Now, despite falling again to a 3-1 series deficit, just like in the quarterfinals, the Canucks would force a Game 7. And even though Linden managed to score both goals for the Canucks in Game 7, the play of Brian Leetch, Mike Richter, the defense as a whole, it would ultimately prevent Linden from scoring a Game 7 hat trick, as the Canucks would lose the Stanley Cup in said Game 7. Now, despite playing through injuries in the playoffs, Linden would post career playoff highs all across the board in 24 games with 12 goals, 13 assists, and 25 points, which was good enough for second in team scoring as far as playoff points was concerned. Then we had a lockout. Now, being this was the league's first lockout, it wasn't nearly as damaging as it could have been, but it still resulted in a 48-game schedule, which Linden played in all of. Now, the Canucks would qualify for the playoffs for the 5th straight season, with Linden adding 40 points. Now, in the playoffs, hoping to replicate the run similar to the 93-94 season, the Canucks would go against the St. Louis Blues, who, thanks to a series of moves of their own, looked a lot like the 1994 New York Rangers, including head coach Mike Keenan. Now, despite being considered underdogs, the Canucks did manage to eliminate the St. Louis Blues in 7 games before running out of steam and getting swept by the Chicago Blackhawks, with Linden adding 8 points in 11 games. The 95-96 season would be Linden's best year. Now, he would break the team record for consecutive games played when he played in his 437th consecutive game on February 12th, 1996. And he also scored his fourth and last regular season hat trick as a Canuck on March 9th, 1996 against the Colorado Avalanche. That's my mom's birthday. All told, he would have his best year, as mentioned, in a full 82 games. He would match his career high of 33 goals and put up career highs in assists with 47 and points with 80. Again, Linden's best year. The Canucks would again advance to the playoffs to meet the Colorado Avalanche. And even with Linden seeming to have the Avs number when it comes to scoring hat tricks, scoring his only playoff hat trick in Game 5, the Canucks wouldn't manage to get past the eventual Stanley Cup champs, being eliminated in 6 games with Linden adding 8 points. 1996-97 would be a bit of a digression for the Canucks, as this would be the first time since 1990 the team would miss the playoffs. Now, it would also see the end of Linden's Ironman streak, and at 482 games, which would later be broken. The streak would end on December 3rd, 1996, as Linden would only be limited to 49 games this season. He did manage to add 40 points, so it wasn't all bad. Now, following this season, Linden would be awarded the King Clancy Memorial Trophy for humanitarian and community contributions. Now, here's the meat and potatoes of this video. 1997-98 would be a year of change for the Canucks, and it would go beyond simple rebranding. Now, before the start of the season, the Canucks would sign Mark Messier, the same Mark Messier who captained the 1994 New York Rangers. And after a slow start to the season, the Canucks would bring in Mike Keenan, the same Mike Keenan who coached the same 1994 New York Rangers Stanley Cup. Now, despite Linden resigning his captaincy to Mark Messier, the relationship between player and coach didn't seem to be a thing that was going to benefit either one, player or coach. So, in a move that really should have not surprised anyone, and I don't even think it really did, Linden would end up being traded to the New York Islanders on February 6th, 1998, for Todd Bertuzzi, Brian McCabe, and a third-round pick in the 1998 NHL entry draft. Now, in the 42 games Linden did play for the Canucks, he would add 24 points. And this would normally be where the story would end. But we're not done here. So, after playing 107 games for the New York Islanders, as well as 107 games for the Montreal Canadiens, and 28 games for the Washington Capitals, Linden would find his way back to the Vancouver Canucks for the 2001-2002 season, being traded from the Capitals, along with a second-round pick in the 2002 NHL entry draft for the first-round pick in the 2002 and a third-round pick in the 2003 NHL entry drafts, respectively, on November 10th, 2001, with his first game back with Vancouver coming the very next day. Now, upon his return, he would be given the alternate A for the Vancouver Canucks alternate captains. Linden would also play in his 1,000th NHL career game on March 26, 2002, in the Canucks' run to clinching a playoff spot for the first time since 1996. Now, Linden would have 34 points in the 64 games he did play with Vancouver, and if you put that with his total with the Washington Capitals, that's 37 points in 80 games. Now, even though the Canucks did make the playoffs, their time would be short, very short, being convincingly eliminated by the President's Trophy winning and eventual Stanley Cup champs in the Detroit Red Wings, with Linden adding 5 points in 6 games. The 2002-2003 season would be Linden's first full season back with the Vancouver Canucks, and it would see him set out to make and break some team records. I think all of these have been broken since. But he would score his 263rd goal as a Vancouver Canuck on November 22, 2002, which broke Stan Smeal's record for most in team history. Linden would add 41 points in 71 games with the Canucks, advancing to the playoffs for the second straight year. Now, in said playoffs, the Canucks seemed to revisit previous playoff history, overcoming a 3-1 series deficit to eliminate the St. Louis Blues in 7 games, before having the same formula played on them, losing in 7 games to the Minnesota Wild, with Linden adding 3 points in 14 games. The 2003-2004 season would see the Canucks have a dominant season, finishing first in the Northwest Division for the team's first division championship since 1993. Along the way, Linden would break the record for games played as a Vancouver Canuck on February 16, 2004, playing in his 897th game as a Canuck. And he would also score his 674th point as a Canuck on March 8, 2004, which at the time became a new record. And for the first time in 5 years, Linden managed to play in all 82 games, posting 36 points in the process. Now in the playoffs, the Canucks would have a very, very back-and-forth 7-game series against the Calgary Flames, but not enough to get past the eventual Stanley Cup finalists, with Linden experiencing a new first in his career, going pointless in the playoffs. Then we had the big one. Now, the big one did end up canceling the entirety of the 2004-2005 season. But when all of the bad negotiating, wanting to negotiate, the disagreeing, when all that ended, everything was said and done, and the NHL returned for 2005-2006, so did Linden. Now, during this season, Linden would score his first penalty shot goal, doing so on November 20th, 2005 against the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. And Linden would also become the first player to play 1,000 games as a Canuck, doing so on April 13th, 2006. Now, unfortunately, the Canucks would fail to qualify for the playoffs, with Linden posting 16 points in a full 82 games. This is the part where the production's starting to digress. The 2006-2007 season would start off with Linden scoring his 300th goal as a Canuck on October the 5th, 2006 against the Detroit Red Wings, becoming the first Canuck to score 300 goals. Now, all told, Linden would add 25 points in 80 games as the Canucks would advance with their second Northwest Division championship to the playoffs after a year away. Now, in the playoffs, Linden would only score 2 goals, but they would count. In the quarterfinals, one is a game winner, and one is a series winner, as the Canucks would eliminate the Dallas Stars in 7 games, before running out of steam and being eliminated by the eventual Stanley Cup champs in the Anaheim Ducks in 5 games, with Linden adding 7 points in 12 games. Now, unfortunately for Linden, this would be the last time he would play in the playoffs in the NHL. 2007-2008 would be Linden's last season in the NHL, but you would only see him play in 59 games. For the remainder of the time, he was a healthy scratch. He did, however, manage to break the team's all-time assist record with his 412th as a Vancouver Canuck on November 8th, 2007. Now, to finish up the season, Linden would add 12 points, the lowest production of his career. At the end of the season, though, Linden would be awarded the NHL Foundation Player Award, which, much like the King Clancy Trophy he won in 1997, recognized his charitable and community work. And so, on June 11th, 2008, 20 years to the day after he was drafted second overall, Trevor Linden would announce his retirement from the NHL. Kind of neat he had that full circle moment in 2001 to make this kind of thing happen. I mean, as a Canuck, you couldn't imagine him retiring anywhere else, right? But that's essentially the story of the number 16 and Trevor Linden with the Vancouver Canucks. Let's talk some numbers. All right, so in 1,140 games played as a Vancouver Canuck, Trevor Linden would score 318 goals, put up 415 assists for 733 points. Now, if we're talking playoffs, a team record 118 games played. He is tied for the team record in goals with 34. He has a team record in assists with 61 and a team record in playoff points with 95. Two-time NHL All-Star Game in 1991 and 1992. He was named to the NHL All-Rookie Team in 1989, won the King Clancy Memorial Trophy in 1997, as well as the NHL Foundation Player Award in 2008. He still has two team records. Of all the records he made and broke, he still has two team records. He has a team record of 15 power play goals in the playoffs, as well as 3 shorthanded goals in the playoffs. Let's not forget he led the team in scoring in 1991 and 1992. As of this recording, he's not yet inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, but the Vancouver Canucks did retire his number on December 17th, 2008. So here's my opinion of the guy. Well, I mean, for my own self, he is the second overall pick I remember from the first NHL draft I ever watched. That was in 1988. But whether you want to call him Captain Clutch, Captain Canuck, he was both. Even if I'm sure he didn't mean to be, he was Captain Clutch. He was Captain Canuck. He was that face of the franchise for a franchise that needed a face like Trevor Linden. And as I had said in the beginning, one of the more underrated power forwards to play the game. A lot of the success the Canucks had, and I mean a lot, was directly involved with Trevor Linden. And really, what else can I say? I mean, if it weren't for Linden, there was no 94 Stanley Cup run. I guarantee it. And I mean, you always want to think of the what ifs, the what could have been. It's always a shame to think the 97-98 season played out the way it did. And if there was ever a possibility that never happened and Linden stayed with the team, would he progressively got better? Hard to say. But it is what it is, right? And as I had mentioned, it was pretty awesome. He had that full circle moment. Whether or not he facilitated that or that just organically happened, it was still cool that it happened. But for what he meant for the team and what he did for the team, especially that 1994 Cup run between him and Pavel Bure, they were all over the map. One of the best players, if not the best player, the Vancouver Canucks had ever drafted. And that's my own opinion. So that's another one of Trev's hockey shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've made it to this point. And if you have made it to this point, please give me that thumbs up. At least let me know you were here. If you want to say hey, again, just let me know you've made it to this point. That thumbs up will help out a lot. If you want to, that red button that says subscribe all over it, come on, you know you want to hit it. If you haven't hit it yet, you know you want to, because I know you want to, and the algorithm knows you want to. So let's make all three of those things happy. I mean, we're at 281 right now, and I want to thank each and every one of you for coming along for the ride. We're seriously hoping to get to 500 by the end of the year. Here's hoping that happens. I mean, no guarantees, but if it does, great. I will be the happiest I've been in a long time. But if you want to, there's a link in my description here. That'll take you to my Facebook page. I'd love to build an audience on that as well. Now, moving forward. Well, believe it or not, I have one retired number already ready for its release date. Just have to wait for its release date. But I'm always working on something, and there's still a Four Nations predictions video I kind of owe, but I have a fair idea when that's coming. But either way, in the meantime, and in between time, be looking for videos from Trev. Data.